The duration of the shooting more or less was around 3 years, but not in one time. You know, it was a different moment for a time of shooting of 3 years. So sometimes I spent on the place 1 month, 1.5 months, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. That depends, because of course I have a life in France, so I have to manage my work and also education of my son. You know, it's something very important for me. So I try to organize the shooting with this kind of data. You know. But the film was this film was a very long process, because I went on the place in Melilla. It was in 2006. So before I start my work before I start my main work, you know, about immigration in the north of France, in Calais. I went on the place because in 2005 I heard about this place, about some people who tried to jump the barbed wire, you know, and 15 people died at this moment. So I was really at my beginning as a filmmaker, you know, and I went on the place just to see what's happened, and I start to meet some people in the forest, in the mountain in Morocco, and even at this time it was really, really complicated. So I was totally convinced by the fact to make a film on this place, but of course for economical reason it wasn't possible for me to stay more and to start a film that I would like to do and that I wanted to do. You know, I knew even at this moment, before I start to make some films and to try to learn how to work on the ground, you know, I felt that I need some time to stay on the place, try to understand how things work, take time to meet the people, you know. So it wasn't possible at this moment to stay on the place and make the film that I had in my mind. So I come back in France. And I make a project, you know, I wrote a project to have some money. And I start to work in Calais. But in my mind, I had always the idea to come back in Melilla. So just after, so of course, you know, it was really the same process. In Calais, at the beginning, I believe, I said that many times, but I believe that I was supposed to stay 3 months and make a short, you know, a sequence of 20 minutes of images. You know, it was a part of a big project, and Melilla will come after, you know, in the second part of the project. But I stayed 3 years. You know, the duration of the shooting in Calais was also 3 years, and I had made 2 features films and 15 shorts. So time was more longer, but in the same time, I start to develop the project, to write the project about Melilla. And I started looking for funding, but it was very a long process, because even if my work in Calais was successful, you know, I won some prize even here in Filmmaker. In the same time, as you know, my approach is not really. I don't want to say conventional, but it's not. I don't have a compassionate approach or social approach. You know, my approach is more political and also poetical. You know, but the idea is to work with some subject and not some victim of society, fate, destiny, or something like that. So, of course, when you have this kind of approach in France, it's very complicated to find some funding. So I start the process for Melilla just after I finished the editing of my work in Calais. I think it was in 2011. But I need 4 years to find the funding, you know. So I come back in Melilla in 2015 to make just a short, how do you say that in English, repérage, you know. And I make a kind of trailer, yes, and with this I make a co-production with Switzerland, and we found all the money. So after, of course, I have another event, you know, I received a proposal from the Centre Pompidou to make a short film, and it became a feature film, Paris est une fête. So the film on Melilla was a little bit on suspension, you know. So I really start to work about the project in 2018. Okay, so the shooting, the duration of the shooting was between 2018 and 2020, you know. So even with the pandemic, And after I start the editing because I did everything, And I work 1.5 years on the editing because I have this part and I have some other parts. It's a little bit secret, but I work about the follow of this part. So it was 1.5 years of editing of a kind of project around Melia. And the first part of this project is now screening in the Filmmaker. So the second part of your question, why 4 hours? Because I had always think like that, I think that a film, the form of the film, the final form of the film, respond to its own necessity. So if I have to make, during the process, what's up, at least if a film have if the duration of the film should be 5 seconds, it will be 5 seconds. If the film should be, 20 hours, okay, it will be 20 hours. I think it's very important for me in the cinema, is a space of freedom, is a way is a field where you can try to redefine, the category, So the category, of course, of human being and the relation with the nature, the world, The cinema for me really are tools to engage a process of redefinition, deconstruction of the representation and try to work about some new presentation about reality, but also, of course, about the topic and also, of course, about myself. It's a dialectical work to redefine, to destroy the representation that the society can, the representation we can cross you and with, or are in part of you. The cinema is a way to engage a work of redefinition. But of course, it's also a way to redefine the category of cinema. And I never talk in terms of format. You have to make a 26 minutes, 52 minutes, or So of course, it's a cost. For example, this film is 4 hours and 15 minutes. It's not usual, but it's not exceptional. You have many films from this duration. But of course, now I realize that in this historical and political moment, this kind of duration is a problem. The attention not only of the audience, but also the attention that the professional, the critics, the festival, can give to this kind of film or of work is complicated. It's more difficult to have the place to present this kind of formats. I can understand that the festival have their not only rules but obligation. In the same time, I think it's important to, of course, to take care about that. Because you work with some kind of necessity. But in the same time, I think it's also important to keep in mind that the cinema, a film, is a proposal of life for me. It's a form of life. When you create a film, you create a new form of life, a new way to live in the world. And also a form of. I have a word. Actually, I work on a little text, so it's not very finished. But I like the idea that a film should be a new form of life, but also a new form of view. Form of life, form of view. And so it's important to take care about the expectation of the festival, but in the same time, it's important to have in mind that perhaps it's more crucial to try to work on the medium of cinema, to attest about the reality with the way you think, the more just, So, of course, after, you have a cost, So the idea was to try to understand how the policies about immigration in Europe works in different parts of Europe. But I try to understand that because it's very easy. You can read a lot of text if you want, take some text in internet, and you can have a kind of knowledge about what are the policies about immigration. But it's more interesting for me to try to understand this kind of policies via the consequences of these policies on the ground, on the people, on the town, and how the people react about that. So, and of course, for me, I try to make cinema. It's not reports. So I'm not interested by the to make a report. You know how the journalists work. You know, cinema is totally different. You know, it's a real investigation on the ground. You know, try to understand the rhythm of the people, of the place, and for that you need time. You need time, and in my conception of work, I need time, and I need to be with the subject, you know, and try to follow them by moment, of course, because it's not exhaustive, but by moment in their life, not for different reasons, to understand really how the policies work, how they can impact the subject, you know, and at the same time to try to understand how this subject react, and also, of course, to try to know this subject, you know. It's not, I'm against the essentialist position, you know, the migrant, it means nothing, you know. It's more interesting to understand, okay, who is Malik, who is Hamza, why he took the decision to leave this place in Morocco, to reach and try to reach Europe, you know. What is the real motivation, and also, of course, how they live, who are they, you know, how they move in space, how they speak, you know. It's more interesting, for me it's very interesting to work about the singularity. So if you want really to destroy the representation that you can have about the subject, even if you have a very critical position about the media, you are totally crossed by some representation. So to stay on the ground with them a lot of time, you know, a lot of time, not only 1 month, but a lot of time. I come back and come back and come back, you know. Even if you have a lot of turnover and some people leave the place, but to come back to make. I work a lot with the repetition of motif, for example. You know, I have hours and hours and hours of close-ups on the ground, of sometimes interview. I have hours. I work about the repetition. You know, I repeat, and of course at the end I just keep some short images. You know, it's different than some other filmmaker, for example, who import in the documentary some technique from the narrative films, you know, the idea of to ask to the subject to repeat a scene. I don't ask to the subject to repeat a scene, never. But me, I repeat the act of shooting a subject or a topic or a motif, you know. And when you work like that, you can engage a work more and more deep, you know, and you destroy the representation. To try to create something new, a presentation, to try to define yourself, your point of view, to be clear. So of course, when you work like that, you know, my position is clear. I'm with them, but I come back. Sometimes I spend night with them, but I come back in my hotel. I'm a filmmaker. I'm not a demagogist. You know, I'm not. But of course, reality are so rude, you know, and violent that of course you are totally impacted by that. Behind the image of the migrant, you know, very generic. Of course, you have human being with a story, sometimes very hard story, and it's a part of the work to try to meet them and to present some part of their reality and life. You know, for me, it's very important to take care. You know, I present some part of their life that I understand. It will be totally fake to say the scene with Amin is really Amin. You know, no. You know, it's a perception that I have. You know, it's basic. It's a basic lesson of cinema, but it's the perception that I have. Is the scene is the fruit of the dialogue that I had with him. But of course, in the dispositive of cinema, you know. So you have, of course, in this dispositive, a play with the representation, with how he tried to present himself, you know. But with all these kind of elements, you can try to touch a kind of truth, which is not the truth, but a cinematographic truth, you know. So of course, when you spend some time with some people who live very this kind of reality are totally intolerable, you know, very violent. Some people die in the place. It's not for me a question to make a pathos or something like that, but it's clear. Just 3 days ago, another guy, a young guy, a teenager, died in the sea because he tried to reach Melilla from Beni Ansar, you know, the border with Morocco, just 4 days before. No. Right now, right now. They found the body on the beach. And during this year, perhaps it's the 5 or the 6 person who died in the sea, because they tried to reach Melilla by swim. So and this is the consequences of the European policies, you know. This is the consequences, because you have some agreements between Morocco and Spain, so between Africa and Europe. So you have some agreement. This is one of the consequences, you know. Death is a consequences of the European policy. It's why for me it's not possible to accept that, you know. But I don't want, so my film tried to present some take position, you know. I built some images which take position, but in the same time it's not propaganda, this kind of stuff, you know. It's try to understand and show how these kind of policies work in different parts of the ground in Europe, and the consequences of these policies. It's interesting to sometimes to stop. You know, I stop. It's important to be clear. You know, to make to have a new distance to continue the work, because also it's a motivation to continue, to try to be at the level of the challenge of the historical and political challenge, and to be at their level, because. For me, something very interesting. If you try to deploy to analyze, to try kind of analyze of the deep meaning of their trip, poetically and politically is very strong, because they fight in a way, or they show some other way, totally different than the way that Europe right now use. So the film tried to show some choice that some people took, and this choice is not only a selfish choice from them to have a better life. No, it's more deep. It's also a discourse about the state of the world.